The red warning lights painted the mining colony in blood. Kang Tae-ho wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked up at the darkening sky. The ion storm was coming faster than anyone had predicted. "All workers evacuate immediately. This is not a drill." The voice crackled through the speakers mounted on every building. Tae-ho could hear the panic in the announcement. He had been on Velrus 9 for 3 years now, and he had never heard that kind of fear before. Around him, people were running. The Talaxian overseers pushed through the crowd, their tall bodies knocking smaller workers aside. They were heading for the transport ships at the landing pad. Tae-ho saw one of them shove an elderly human engineer to the ground without even looking back. Tae-ho grabbed his emergency pack from his locker. His hands moved automatically, checking the supplies. Radiation pills, water, breathing mask, emergency beacon. Everything was there. His shelter was 1 kilometer away, near the eastern ridge. He had practiced the route 100 times, but never during a real storm. His communicator buzzed. "Tae-ho, where are you?" It was Choi Woo-jin, his supervisor and the closest thing he had to a friend on this planet. "The transport ships are leaving in 10 minutes. Get to the landing pad now." "I'm heading to my emergency shelter," Tae-ho replied, starting to jog toward the mine exit. "It's closer than the pad." "Don't be stupid. The shelter might not hold against this storm. Get on a ship." Tae-ho didn't answer. He knew Woo-jin was right, but the landing pad was in the opposite direction. The storm would hit before he could get there. His shelter was his best chance. The wind was already picking up. Dust and small rocks flew through the air, stinging his face. Tae-ho pulled his mask on and kept moving. The mine entrance was just ahead, a dark mouth in the side of the hill. He needed to pass it to reach the path to his shelter. That was when he heard the sound. It was high-pitched and desperate, cutting through the howl of the wind. Tae-ho stopped and listened. There it was again, a child crying. He turned toward the mine entrance. The scaffolding that had been set up for repairs had collapsed, probably from the wind, and beneath the twisted metal, something was moving. Tae-ho ran toward it. As he got closer, he could see better. A small figure was trapped under the scaffolding. The child had blue-gray skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. A Verath. The native people of this planet worked the lowest jobs in the mine, doing the dangerous work that even the poorest humans wouldn't take. The child looked up at him with large, dark eyes. She couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old. Her leg was caught under a heavy metal beam. The glow from her skin was flickering weakly, like a dying light. "Hey, it's okay," Tae-ho said softly, kneeling beside her. "I'm going to help you." The child whimpered. She said something in her own language that Tae-ho couldn't understand, but the meaning was clear enough. She was terrified and in pain. Tae-ho looked at the beam. It was too heavy to lift alone, but he could use the collapsed scaffolding as a lever. He pulled off his pack and got to work. His communicator buzzed again. "Tae-ho, the radiation levels are rising." "You have 5 minutes, maybe less. Where are you?" "At the mine entrance," Tae-ho said, grunting as he positioned a metal pole under the beam. "There's a kid trapped here." There was a long silence. "Tae-ho, listen to me. You need to leave now. That's an order." "I can't do that." "You'll die." "Then I'll die." Tae-ho put all his weight on the lever. The beam shifted slightly. The child cried out as pressure moved on her leg. Sorry, almost there." "Damn it, Tae-ho!" Woo-jin was shouting now. "It's just a Verath kid. They're everywhere. You can't—" Tae-ho turned off his communicator. He adjusted the lever and tried again. This time, the beam lifted enough for the child to pull her leg free. She crawled out, sobbing, and collapsed onto the ground. Tae-ho could see that her leg was badly hurt, maybe broken. She wouldn't be able to walk. The sky above them had turned a sick yellow-green color. The storm was almost here. Tae-ho could feel the static electricity in the air, making his hair stand up. His radiation detector was screaming. He looked at his shelter, Then at the child. The shelter was built for one person. It had just enough air, water, and radiation shielding for him to survive until the storm passed. If he brought the child, they might both die. But leaving her here was the same as killing her. Tae-ho picked up a piece of the collapsed scaffolding. It was a thin metal sheet, the kind they used for heat shielding. It wasn't meant for radiation, but it was better than nothing. He wrapped it around himself and the child as best he could, creating a makeshift shell. "Okay, little one," he said, lifting her onto his back. She was lighter than he expected, her bones hollow like a bird's. "Hold on tight." She wrapped her thin arms around his neck. He could feel her shaking. Tae-ho started running. The wind was a solid force now, pushing against him with every step. Sand and rocks flew through the air like bullets. He kept his head down and followed the path by memory. His radiation detector was going crazy, the sound merging with the roar of the storm. Halfway there, he fell. The wind caught his makeshift shield and knocked him sideways. He rolled, protecting the child with his body, and felt something in his shoulder pop. Pain shot down his arm, but he forced himself to stand. "Not far now," he gasped. He couldn't tell if he was talking to the child or himself. The shelter appeared out of the dust like a miracle. It was just a reinforced concrete box half buried in the ground, but it looked beautiful. Tae-ho's fingers were numb as he punched in the access code. The door swung open. He stumbled inside and fell to his knees. The child rolled off his back. Behind them, he could see the storm fully unleashed now, a wall of yellow-green light that burned to look at. Tae-ho kicked the door closed and spun the lock. The shelter's lights came on automatically. The air system started humming. His radiation detector finally began to quiet down. The child was curled in a ball on the floor, still crying. Tae-ho crawled over to her and gently checked her leg. It was swollen and discolored, but the bone didn't seem broken. He pulled out his medical kit and started treating her wounds. "You're safe now," he told her, though she probably couldn't understand him. "We're going to be okay." Outside, the storm raged. The walls of the shelter shook, but they held. Tae-ho didn't know that. High above the planet, in a ship hidden by clouds, someone was watching. He didn't know that the child he had saved was not just any Verath, and he definitely didn't know that his life was about to change forever. All he knew was that he had made a choice, and whatever happened next, he could live with it. The storm lasted 14 hours. Tae-ho spent most of that time sitting against the wall of the shelter, watching the child sleep. She had finally stopped crying after he gave her some water and wrapped her leg in bandages. The medical scanner said she would be okay, but she needed proper treatment soon. When the all-clear signal finally sounded, Tae-ho carefully lifted the child and stepped outside. The colony looked like a war zone. Buildings had collapsed. Equipment was scattered everywhere. A few people were already moving through the wreckage, searching for survivors. The medical center was still standing. Tae-ho carried the child through the door and was immediately surrounded by doctors and nurses. They took her from his arms and rushed her to a treatment room. One of the doctors, a human woman named Lee Mina, stopped to check on him. "You need treatment too," she said, looking at his shoulder. "That's dislocated." "I'm fine," Tae-ho said, but the room was starting to spin. The adrenaline that had kept him going was wearing off. Mina caught him as he fell. He woke up 6 hours later in a hospital bed. His shoulder was back in place and wrapped in a medical brace. Woo Jin was sitting in a chair beside him, looking tired and angry. "You're an idiot," Woo Jin said. "Good morning to you, too," Tae-ho replied. His throat was dry. "Water?" Woo Jin handed him a bottle. "The colony administrator wants to see you. Grixnal is not happy." "When is he ever happy?" "This is serious, Tae-ho. You ignored direct orders. You risked your life for a native kid. He's talking about terminating your contract and sending you back to Earth." Tae-ho drank the water slowly. The thought of going back to Earth wasn't entirely bad. He missed his sister, Ji-yun, but if they fired him, he wouldn't get his completion bonus. That money was supposed to pay for Ji-yun's university. "What about the child?" he asked. "She's fine. Broken leg, some cuts, mild radiation exposure. She'll recover." Woo Jin paused. "She keeps asking for you. The nurses don't know what to do." Tae-ho smiled despite everything. "Can I see her?" "After you talk to Grixnell." The colony administrator's office had somehow survived the storm without a scratch. Grixnell sat behind his desk, his insect-like face clicking in annoyance as Tae-ho entered. "Engineer Kang," Grixnell said coldly, "do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused?" "I saved a child's life," Tae-ho replied. "You risked a valuable worker for a native. The Verath are replaceable. You are not. Your contract specifically states that you must follow all safety protocols. It also says that I should help anyone in immediate danger." Grixnell's mandibles clicked faster. "Don't quote regulations to me, human. You're fired. Pack your things. There's a transport leaving tomorrow." Before Tae-ho could respond, the office door opened. A tall Verath man walked in, wearing armor that seemed to shimmer with its own light. 2 guards followed him. Grixnell stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Hi, Commander Veltaris. I didn't know you were coming. This is an honor." "Silence," Veltaris said. His voice was deep and commanding. He looked at Tae-ho with dark, intelligent eyes. "You are Kang Tae-ho?" "Yes," Tae-ho said. "Come with me. We need to talk." Grixnell started to protest, but Veltaris silenced him with a look. Tae-ho followed the commander out of the office, very confused. They walked to a private meeting room. Veltaris dismissed his guards and closed the door. "Do you know who the child was?" Veltaris asked. "A Verath kid from the settlement," Tae-ho said. "I didn't ask her name." "Her name is Nira. She is the youngest daughter of King Olmareth." Tae-ho stared at him. "What?" "She was here in secret for her safety. There was an attempt to take over the throne. We sent her here with guards, to a place where no one would look for her. But during the storm, her guards were killed. The evacuation was chaos. She was left behind." Tae-ho sat down heavily. A princess. He had saved a princess. "I was in orbit when the storm hit," Veltaris continued. "I was watching the evacuation through security cameras, trying to find her. I saw what you did. I saw you risk your life for a child you didn't know, a child of a different species, when everyone else was running away." "Anyone would have done the same," Tae-ho said quietly. "No," Veltaris said firmly. "They wouldn't have. My own people abandoned her. Your own supervisor ordered you to leave, but you didn't. The king has been watching the recordings. He wants to meet you." "I don't need to meet a king. I just want to know the kid is okay." Veltaris smiled slightly. "She is more than okay. And the king has authorized me to offer you a reward. Anything you want. Money, land, citizenship in the Verath Empire. Name it." Tae-ho thought about his sister. He thought about the completion bonus he wouldn't get now. He thought about all the workers in the colony, human and Verath, who were treated like tools instead of people. "I want better safety rules for everyone here," he said. "Real emergency shelters that can hold more than one person. Better warning systems. Medical care that doesn't ask what species you are before treating you. And I want that administrator Grixnell investigated for how he runs this place." Veltaris looked surprised. "That's all? You save a princess and you ask for regulations?" "That's what I want." The commander studied him for a long moment. "The king will be even more interested in meeting you now. But there is a problem. Not everyone in the Verath court is happy about what happened. Some believe that humans are dangerous, unpredictable. They think you might have known who Nira was. They think you staged the rescue for political gain." That's crazy, Taeho said. I didn't know anything. I believe you. The king believes you. But Duchess Shankara does not. She has demanded that you face investigation. She wants you brought to the capital to prove your intentions were pure. And if I refuse, then she will declare that you kidnapped a princess. She will demand your execution. I'm sorry, but you don't have a choice. Taeho rubbed his face with his good hand. 2 days ago, his biggest problem was meeting his work quota. Now he was involved in alien politics. When do we leave? He asked. Tomorrow. I've already arranged for your supervisor, Choi Woo-jin, to come with you. And the doctor, Lee Mi-na, has volunteered to join us as well. She has experience with Verath culture. Can I see Nira before we go? Of course. They went to the medical center. Nira was sitting up in bed, her leg in a cast. When she saw Taeho, her face lit up. She said something in her language, her small voice excited. She says thank you, Veltaris translated. She says you are brave. She says her father will give you anything you want. Taeho sat on the edge of the bed. Nira reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cool and smooth, and the glow had returned, steady and bright. Tell her she's very brave too, Taeho said. Tell her I'm glad she's okay. Veltaris translated. Nira smiled and held his hand tighter. Looking at her, Taeho felt something settle in his chest. Whatever happened next, whatever this Duchess wanted to do to him, it had been worth it. This child was alive because of his choice. Nothing could take that away. But as he left the medical center that night, preparing for the journey to the capital, he couldn't shake the feeling that his troubles were just beginning. He had saved a life, but in doing so, he had stepped into a much bigger storm. And this one, he couldn't just hide from and wait out. The royal frigate was unlike anything Taeho had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. The journey to Velis Prime would take 3 days, and Taeho spent most of the first day feeling completely out of place. Woo-jin seemed to be enjoying himself, fascinated by the Verath technology. Dr. Lee Mi-na spent her time talking with the crew, learning about their culture, but Taeho mostly stayed in his cabin, trying not to think about what was waiting for him. On the second day, Veltaris came to find him. You should eat something, the commander said. You'll need your strength. I'm not hungry, Taeho replied. The king is a fair man. If you tell the truth, you have nothing to fear. And this Duchess? Shankara? Veltaris's expression darkened. She is difficult. She believes that the Verath should remain separate from other species. She sees humans as chaotic and dangerous. When she learned that a human saved Nira, she was angry that we owed such a debt. So no matter what I say, she'll think I'm lying. Probably, but the king has the final word, not her. Taeho looked out the window at the stars streaming past. Why does she hate humans so much? 50 years ago, human traders cheated many Verath out of their land and resources. They promised technology and wealth, but delivered nothing. Shankara's family lost everything. She has never forgotten. I'm not responsible for what other humans did. I know that. The king knows that. But to her, you are all the same. Veltaris put a hand on Taeho's shoulder. Show them who you really are. That's all you can do. Velis Prime appeared on the 3rd day, a planet of deep blue oceans and green continents. The capital city was built into the side of a mountain, thousands of crystal towers rising toward the sky. The royal palace stood at the very top, catching the sunlight and scattering it into rainbows. They landed in a private courtyard. Taeho, Woo-jin, and Mi-na were escorted through halls so beautiful they seemed like dreams. Everything glowed with that same soft light. Verath people in elegant clothes stopped to stare at the humans. The throne room was enormous. King Olmarith sat on a raised platform, wearing robes that seemed to be made of starlight. He was taller than Veltaris, and his skin had a golden tint that marked him as royalty, but his eyes were kind. Beside him stood little Nira, her leg still in a cast. When she saw Tai-Ho, she tried to run to him. The king caught her gently. "Welcome, Kang Tai-Ho," the king said. His voice filled the room without being loud. "You have my eternal gratitude. You saved my daughter when others would not." Tai-Ho bowed, unsure what else to do. "I'm glad she's safe, Your Majesty." "Father, is this him?" Nira asked in her language. Veltaris translated quietly for Tai-Ho. "This is the one who carried me through the storm?" "Yes, my light. This is him." Nira smiled so brightly that her skin glowed brighter too. But then another voice cut through the room. How touching. A human playing hero. A Vareth woman stepped forward from the crowd of courtiers. She wore dark robes, and her face was sharp and cold. This had to be Duchess Shankara. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing to the king, "I mean no disrespect to your gratitude, but we must be certain of this human's intentions. I formally request the trial of intent." A murmur went through the crowd. The king's expression didn't change, but Tai-Ho saw his jaw tighten. "That is your right under our law," the king said slowly. "Kang Tai-Ho, the Duchess questions whether your actions were truly selfless. The trial of intent will test your character through 3 challenges. Do you accept?" Tai-Ho looked at Veltaris, who nodded slightly. There was no other choice. "I accept," Tai-Ho said. The first test came the next morning. Tai-Ho was brought to a small room with white walls. Shankara was there, along with several other Vareth officials. In the center of the room was a clear container filled with glowing crystals. "These are memory crystals," Shankara explained. "They can show us the truth of any moment in your past. If you consent to use them, we can see what you were thinking when you found Princess Nira. We will know if you recognized her, if you knew who she was." Tai-Ho looked at the crystals. "Will it hurt?" "No, but it will reveal everything about that moment. Every thought, every feeling, every secret. There is nowhere to hide." "Then let's do it," Tai-Ho said. Shankara looked surprised, like she had expected him to refuse. She placed one of the crystals against his forehead. It was cold at first, then warm. The memory played out in the air above them, visible to everyone. They saw Tai-Ho running through the storm. They saw him find Nira trapped under the scaffolding. They heard his thoughts clearly. "Just a kid. She's so scared. I have to help her." They saw him lift the beam, saw him wrap her in his makeshift shield, saw him run through the deadly radiation, and in all of it, there was no recognition, no calculation, just instinct and compassion. When it was over, Shankara's face was tight. "You truly didn't know." "I told you that," Tai-Ho said. "The first test is passed," one of the officials announced. The second test was stranger. Tai-Ho was put in a simulation, a virtual reality so real it felt like touching. He stood in a burning building. Alarms were screaming. "You have 2 minutes," a voice said. "In the East Wing are priceless Vareth artifacts, pieces of our history that can never be replaced. In the West Wing are prisoners of war, enemy soldiers who tried to kill our people. You can only save one. Choose." Tai-Ho didn't hesitate. He ran toward the West Wing. The prisoners were in cages. Some were Vareth, some were other species he didn't recognize. They shouted at him in languages he didn't understand. He started breaking the locks with a metal bar he found. "Why save them?" the voice asked as he worked. "They are criminals. Murderers, perhaps. The artifacts are innocent." "People aren't things," Tai-Ho said, pulling another prisoner free. "I can't put a price on a life, no matter whose it is." "Even if they would kill you if they could?" even then. When the simulation ended, Tae-ho found himself back in the White Room. The officials were talking quietly among themselves. Shankara looked frustrated. "He chooses emotion over logic," she said. "This proves nothing." "It proves he values life above all else," another official replied. "The second test is passed." The third test was the one Tae-ho had been dreading. It was a combat trial. He stood in an arena while thousands of Verath watched from the seats above. Across from him was Shankara's champion, a warrior named Torkan who was twice Tae-ho's size and covered in battle scars. "You may yield at any time," Veltaris told him before the match. "There is no shame in it." "If I yield, she wins," Tae-ho said. "If you die, she definitely wins." Tae-ho managed a weak smile. "Then I guess I'd better not die." The fight began. Torkan moved like water, fast and smooth. His first strike knocked Tae-ho to the ground. The crowd gasped. Tae-ho rolled away from the next attack and scrambled to his feet. He couldn't match Torkan's strength or speed, but he had spent 3 years working in a mine, solving problems with limited tools. He knew how to think differently. When Torkan charged again, Tae-ho didn't try to block. He dodged to the side and threw sand from the arena floor into the warrior's eyes. While Torkan was blinded, Tae-ho used the environment. He kicked a weapon rack toward his opponent, making him trip. He stayed mobile, never letting Torkan get a solid hit. It wasn't pretty or honorable. It was desperate and chaotic. But it worked. After 10 minutes, Torkan was tired and frustrated. He had the advantage, but couldn't land a finishing blow. Finally, he slipped on the sandy floor. Tae-ho could have struck then, could have ended the fight. Instead, he stepped back and offered his hand to help Torkan up. The warrior stared at the offered hand in shock. "I don't want to hurt you," Tae-ho said. "I'm not your enemy. I'm just trying to prove I did the right thing." Slowly, Torkan took his hand. Tae-ho pulled him to his feet. The arena was completely silent. Then, to everyone's surprise, Torkan bowed to Tae-ho. "You fight without honor, but you have more honor than anyone I've faced," the warrior said. "I yield." The crowd erupted. Some were cheering, some were shouting in anger. King Olmareth stood from his throne. "The trial is complete," the king announced. "Kang Tae-ho has proven his character. His actions on Velris 9 were pure, driven by compassion without expectation of reward. Duchess Shankara, your concerns have been addressed. Do you accept this judgment?" Shankara's face was like stone. "I accept," she said through gritted teeth. "But mark my words, Your Majesty, this human and his kind will bring chaos to our empire." She turned and left the arena. That night, there was a feast in Tae-ho's honor, but the celebration was interrupted by urgent news. Veltaris burst into the hall, his face grave. "Your Majesty, we've received intelligence. The conspirators who tried to take the throne are regrouping. They plan to strike during the Unity Festival in 5 days. They want to kill you in front of the entire empire." The war room was deep beneath the palace, carved from solid stone. Maps and tactical displays covered the walls. Veltaris stood at the center, pointing at different locations, while his officers took notes. "The Unity Festival brings together leaders from every territory," he explained. "It's the perfect target. Security will be tight, but with so many people there are countless vulnerabilities." King Olmareth sat quietly, listening. Tae-ho, Wu Jin, and Mina had been invited to the meeting, though Tae-ho wasn't sure why. They were engineers and scientists, not soldiers. "We've identified the conspirators' leader," Veltaris continued. "General Thalnok, nephew to Duchess Shankara. He commands a private military force. Intelligence suggests he has sympathizers within the Royal Guard itself." "You're saying we can't trust our own soldiers?" one of the officers asked. "I'm saying we can't trust anyone completely. That's why this is so dangerous." The king spoke for the first time. "What do you recommend?" "Commander, cancel the festival. Move you to a secure location until we root out all the conspirators." "No!" The king's voice was firm. "That would show weakness. It would tell our people that we're afraid. The conspirators want chaos and fear. I won't give them that." "Your Majesty, with respect, your life—" "My life is not more important than the stability of the Empire." The king looked around the room. "We will hold the festival, but we need a plan that these conspirators won't expect." There was a long silence. The officers looked at each other, but no one spoke. Their entire approach to security was based on tradition and honor, but the enemy clearly wasn't following those rules. Tae-ho found himself standing up. Everyone turned to look at him. "I might have an idea," he said, "if you want to hear it." Veltaris nodded. "Speak." "Your security plans follow predictable patterns, right? Ceremonial routes, traditional guard positions, protocols that have been used for hundreds of years?" "That is correct. It is how things have always been done." "Then that's the problem. The conspirators know what to expect. They've studied your traditions. They know where you'll be weak." Tae-ho walked to the tactical display. "What if we did the opposite? What if we gave them chaos instead of order?" "Explain," the king said, leaning forward with interest. Over the next hour, Tae-ho laid out his plan. Use decoys and false information. Create unpredictable patrol patterns. Set traps in places the conspirators would expect to be safe. Make them second-guess every move. "The enemy expects honor and tradition," Tae-ho said. "Give them confusion. Make them paranoid. Force them to make mistakes." Most of the Vareth officers looked horrified. This wasn't how warfare was done in their culture, but Veltaris was nodding slowly. "It could work," the commander said. "It's exactly the kind of thinking they won't anticipate." "It's dishonorable," one officer protested. "Traps and deception? That's not our way." "And my daughter almost died because people followed our way during an emergency," the king said quietly. "Perhaps it's time we learn to think differently. Commander Veltaris, work with Kang Tae-ho. I'm placing him in charge of security planning for the festival." The room erupted in protests. A human leading their security? It was unthinkable. "Enough!" The king's voice cut through the noise. "This human risked his life to save my child when my own people ran away. I trust him. And I trust that his different perspective is exactly what we need. Anyone who disagrees can leave now." No one left, but Tae-ho could feel the anger and resentment directed at him. Over the next 3 days, Tae-ho worked constantly. He assembled a team, Veltaris for military strategy, Wu Jin for technical systems, Mina for cultural advice, and a young Varath intelligence officer named Kaires, who was eager to try new methods. They also brought in Captain Han Sung-ho, a human security contractor who had worked on several alien worlds. He had experience with exactly this kind of situation. "The key is making them think they have the advantage," Sung-ho explained to the team. "Let them believe their plan is working, right up until the moment we spring the trap." Mina worked with Kaires to investigate the conspiracy's roots. They spent hours going through intelligence reports and financial records. Finally, they found the connection they needed. "It's bigger than we thought," Mina reported to the king. "General Thalnok has been planning this for months. He's convinced that your openness to other species is weakening the Empire. He wants to kill you, blame it on human terrorists, and take the throne himself." "And his aunt, the Duchess?" Veltaris asked. "We don't have proof she's directly involved, but she's been funding his military forces. At the very least, she knew what he was planning." The king's expression was pained. Shankara was once a trusted advisor. This betrayal cuts deep. "The good news is that we know their plan now," Kaires said, pulling up a holographic display. They'll strike during the king's speech at the festival. Multiple attack points, creating chaos. In the confusion, assassins will move in for the kill. Then we turn their own plan against them, Tejo said. We let them start their attack, but the king won't be where they think he is. We use a holographic decoy. And while they're focused on the fake target, Seung-ho added, we surround them and capture the entire conspiracy at once. Veltaris studied the plan carefully. It's risky. If anything goes wrong, if they realize it's a trap, they won't, Tejo said, because we're going to give them exactly what they expect to see, right up until we don't. The night before the festival, the king asked to speak with Taiho privately. They walked in the palace gardens under the light of 3 moons. You've given me much to think about, the king said, not just about security, but about how we Verath see the universe. We pride ourselves on honor and tradition, but perhaps we've become too rigid, too predictable. Your traditions are important, Tejo said. They're part of who you are. But every culture needs to adapt sometimes. My daughter speaks of you constantly. She calls you her Stormwalker, the one who carries people to safety. Do you know what that means to her people? No, Your Majesty. In our oldest legends, there are heroes who walk through impossible dangers to save others. We thought they were just stories, but perhaps they were prophecies. The king stopped and looked at Tejo. Tomorrow, I will stand as bait for assassins. My life will depend on your plan working. I know. I won't let you down. I believe you. But I need you to promise me something. If the plan fails, if I fall, protect Nira. Get her away from here. Keep her safe. Tejo felt the weight of that request. Your Majesty, nothing is going to happen to you. The plan will work. Promise me anyway. I promise. The king smiled sadly. Thank you. Now go rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. But Tejo couldn't rest. He spent the night going over every detail of the plan with his team. They checked and rechecked every system, every position, every backup plan. By the time the sun rose, they were as ready as they could be. The Unity Festival began at noon. Thousands of Verath filled the great plaza in front of the palace. Music played, banners flew in the wind. It looked like a celebration, but Tejo could see the tension in Veltaris's face. The commander knew what was coming. At exactly 2 o'clock, the king appeared on the ceremonial platform. Except it wasn't really the king. It was a holographic projection so perfect that even Tejo, who knew it was fake, couldn't see any flaws. The real king was safely hidden in a shielded bunker beneath the palace. The king's hologram began to speak. His words were about unity and peace, about bringing different species together. Tejo watched the crowd carefully, looking for any sign of the conspirators. There, 3 men near the fountain were reaching into their coats. A woman by the eastern entrance was speaking urgently into a hidden communicator. A group of palace guards in the north section were moving into position, but their movements were wrong, too coordinated. Targets acquired. Seung-ho's voice came through Tejo's earpiece. Counting at least 20 hostiles. They're getting ready to move. Wait for my signal, Tejo replied. Let them commit. One of the men by the fountain pulled out a weapon. It was shaped like nothing Tejo had seen before, but he recognized it as deadly. The man raised it toward the platform. Now! Tejo shouted. Everything happened at once. The holographic king flickered and vanished. Lights blazed around the plaza, blinding the conspirators. Seung-ho's team moved in from hidden positions. Veltaris's loyal soldiers dropped nets from above, trapping clusters of enemies. But General Thalnok had expected some kind of resistance. From a building overlooking the plaza, his forces opened fire with heavy weapons. The crowd panicked, running in all directions. We've got a problem, Wu Jin said through the comm. They've got military hardware. This isn't just an assassination, it's an invasion. Tejo looked up at the building where Thalnok's forces were firing from. Seung-ho, Can you reach that position? Not in time. They're dug in hard. Then we need a distraction. Wu Jin, can you overload the power grid in that section? Create a blackout? On it. While his team worked, Taeho ran through the chaos toward the palace. He had to make sure Nira was safe. That was his promise to the king. But as he reached the palace gardens, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Duchess Shankara was there, holding Nira by the arm, and in her other hand, she held a blade to the child's throat. Taeho stopped moving. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Nira's eyes were wide with fear, but she wasn't crying. She was trying to be brave. "Don't come any closer, human," Shankara said. Her voice was cold and controlled, but Taeho could see her hand shaking slightly. She was afraid, too. "I have a ship waiting at the north landing pad. You're going to let me walk there with the child." "You know I can't do that," Taeho said, keeping his voice calm. He raised his hands slowly, showing he had no weapons. "Then she dies, and her death will be on your hands." Shankara pulled Nira closer. "This is your fault, you know. All of this. If you hadn't interfered, if you had just let her die in that storm, none of this would be happening. If I had let her die, I wouldn't be able to live with myself." "How noble, how human. You act on emotion without thinking of consequences." Shankara started backing toward the landing pad, dragging Nira with her. "My nephew's plan would have worked if not for you. We could have saved the Empire from this madness of mixing with other species." Taeho followed carefully, keeping his distance. He knew Veltaris and the others were listening through his comm. They would be moving into position. He just needed to keep Shankara talking. "You really believe that?" Taeho asked. "That keeping yourselves separate makes you stronger? It keeps us pure. It keeps us who we are." "It keeps you alone," Taeho said. "I've learned a lot about your people these past few days. You have amazing technology, beautiful art, a culture that goes back thousands of years. But you're dying out. Your population is shrinking. You need help, but you're too proud to ask for it." "We don't need help from primitives like you." "Maybe not, but Nira will. In 20 years, she'll be ruling an empire that's smaller and weaker than the one her father has now. Unless she learns to work with other species. Unless she learns that strength comes from cooperation, not isolation." Shankara's face twisted with anger. "Don't you dare lecture me about my own people. You know nothing about us." "You're right," Taeho admitted. "I don't know much, but I know what I saw on Velris 9. I saw Vareth and humans working together in the mines. I saw them helping each other during the storm. That colony is a mess, but the people there figured out how to survive by relying on each other. Not in spite of their differences, but because of them." They had reached the landing pad. A small ship was waiting, its engines already running. Shankara backed toward the ramp, still holding Nira. "Enough talking," she said. "I'm leaving. Try to follow me, and the child dies." This was it. This was the moment. Taeho could see movement in the shadows around the landing pad. Veltaris and his soldiers were in position. All they needed was a clean shot. But Shankara was using Nira as a shield too effectively. Taeho made his decision. He started walking forward. "What are you doing?" Shankara demanded. "Stop!" "No," Taeho said, still advancing. "You're not taking her. I won't let you. I'll kill her. I swear I will." "No, you won't." Taeho kept walking, slow and steady. "Because you're not a monster. You're angry and scared, and you've convinced yourself that what you're doing is right. But you won't hurt a child. That's not who you are. You don't know me. I know you loved your family. I know you lost everything because of what humans did to your people. I know you've spent your whole life trying to protect what's left of your culture. That's not evil. That's love. It's just been twisted into something poisonous." Taeho was only 10 feet away now. He could see tears in Shankara's eyes. "My people were cheated," she said, her voice breaking. "We were left with nothing. And now the king wants to invite them in, to make them our equals? How is that justice?" It's not, Taeho said honestly. What happened to your family was wrong. Those humans should have been punished, but that was 50 years ago. The humans on Velris 9 now, they're just workers trying to survive, same as everyone else. Punishing them won't bring your family back. But it would feel right. For maybe a day, and then you'd just be empty again. Shankara's hand was shaking harder now. The blade wavered away from Neera's throat. Taeho took another step forward. Let her go, he said softly. Please, she's just a child. She doesn't deserve this. No one deserves what they get, Shankara whispered. But her grip on Neera loosened. That was when Kairos took the shot. The young intelligence officer had circled around to get an angle. The stun blast hit Shankara in the shoulder, not enough to kill, but enough to make her drop the blade. Neera broke free and ran straight to Taeho, who caught her and held her close. Veltaris and his soldiers rushed forward, surrounding Shankara before she could recover. The Duchess didn't resist. She just knelt there on the landing pad, crying. I'm sorry, she said to no one in particular. I'm so sorry. Taeho handed Neera to one of the guards and walked over to Shankara. He knelt beside her. I forgive you, he said, and maybe someday you can forgive us. She looked up at him, confused and broken. Veltaris pulled her to her feet and led her away. The battle in the plaza was over. Shung Ho's team had captured General Thalnok and most of his forces. Some had escaped, but without their leaders, they weren't a threat anymore. The conspiracy was finished. King Oel Mareth emerged from his bunker and immediately went to find his daughter. When he saw her, safe in the guard's arms, he nearly collapsed with relief. He took her from the guards and held her so tightly that she squeaked. Father, I'm okay, Neera said in her language. Taeho saved me again. The king looked at Taeho with tears in his eyes. I am forever in your debt. You don't owe me anything, Taeho said. I just did what anyone should do. That is where you are wrong. Most would not. Most did not. The king stood, still holding Neera. Commander Veltaris, gather the court. I have an announcement to make. An hour later, the remaining festival-goers and court members gathered in the great hall. The king stood before them, Neera by his side, looking every bit the powerful ruler he was. Today, enemies tried to destroy us, the king began. They tried to use our traditions against us. They tried to make us afraid. They failed because we had help from an unexpected source, a human engineer named Kang Tae-ho, who taught us that strength comes not from following old rules blindly, but from adapting to new challenges. The king gestured, and Veltaris brought forward a small box. In our oldest traditions, we have an honor called Korvath, Stormwalker. It is given only to those who face impossible odds to save others. No one has earned this title in 300 years. Today, I grant it to Kang Tae-ho. Veltaris opened the box. Inside was a crystal pendant that glowed with its own light. With this title comes responsibility, the king continued. You will be an advisor to the throne, a bridge between our people and yours. You will help us learn to work together, as you have shown us is possible. Taeho stood frozen. He had expected to go back to Velris 9, back to his normal life. This was something else entirely. Your Majesty, I'm not qualified for this. I'm just an engineer. You are a man who risked everything for a child he didn't know. That is the only qualification that matters. The king smiled. Besides, you can refuse. This is an offer, not a command. Though my daughter would be very sad if you left. Neera looked up at him with those big, hopeful eyes. Tae-ho found himself smiling. Well, I can't disappoint her, can I? The court erupted in cheers. Not everyone was happy about it. Tae-ho could see some faces that were still suspicious or angry, but change never came easily. 6 months later, Taeho stood in the newly renovated colony on Velris 9. The place looked completely different. Proper safety shelters had been built for everyone. Medical facilities that treated all species equally. Fair wages and working conditions. Humans and Verath worked side by side, and while there were still tensions, things were getting better. Wu Jin had been promoted to colony director. Mina was running a cultural exchange program. Even Seung Ho had stayed on as security chief, enjoying the challenge of training a mixed human-Verath security force. Taeho's sister, Ji Yoon, had come to visit from Earth. She still couldn't quite believe everything that had happened. "My brother, the alien diplomat," she said, shaking her head. "Mom and Dad would have been so proud." "I'm still just an engineer," Taeho insisted. "I just got lucky." "Lucky? You almost died multiple times." Details. A familiar ship descended from the sky. Nira was visiting, along with Veltaris and a small escort. The princess had fully recovered from her injuries, and she was growing fast. She ran to Taeho the moment she left the ship. "Uncle Tae, guess what? Father is sending me to school on Earth. I'm going to learn about human culture." "That's wonderful," Taeho said, kneeling to her level. "You'll love Earth. My sister can show you around. Will you visit me there?" "Of course. As often as I can." Veltaris walked over, looking amused. "She's been talking about nothing else for weeks. I think she's more excited about this than her father is nervous." "The king is nervous? Sending his youngest daughter to another planet? Of course he's nervous, but he knows it's important. She needs to understand the people she'll rule alongside someday." They watched as Nira and Ji-Yun started talking, the young princess already asking a million questions about Earth. Veltaris smiled. "You know, when I first saw you on those security cameras, running through the storm, I thought you were insane." "You weren't wrong. Perhaps not, but maybe that's what we needed. Someone crazy enough to do the impossible." Veltaris put a hand on Taeho's shoulder. "Thank you, my friend, for everything." That evening, another ion storm rolled across Velris 9, but this time the colony was ready. The warning systems gave plenty of notice. Everyone evacuated to the proper shelters in an orderly fashion. Humans and Verath helped each other, making sure no one was left behind. Taeho stood at the shelter entrance, counting people as they came in. The last ones through were a Verath family with 3 children. The father nodded gratefully as he passed. "Thank you, Stormwalker." The title still felt strange to Taeho. He had just done what felt right. But if it helped people, if it brought humans and Verath together, then he would wear it proudly. As he sealed the shelter door and the storm raged outside, Taeho thought about that day when this had all started. One moment of decision, one child who needed help, one storm that had changed everything. He had lifted an alien orphan through the storm, not knowing the king was watching. But in the end, it wasn't about the king or the rewards or the titles. It was about doing the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it was dangerous, even when no one would have blamed you for walking away. That was what it meant to be human. And that was why, despite all their chaos and emotion and reckless compassion, humanity had earned its place among the stars. The storm howled against the walls, but inside the shelter people were safe and warm. Human and Verath sat together, sharing food and stories, waiting for the storm to pass. And Taeho knew that whatever challenges came next, they would face them together.